She told him the truth and lost him. Have you ever loved someone so deeply that you were willing to fight for them, even when they had already started walking away? Sophia Wanjiru knew that feeling. She wasn't born into an ordinary family. She was born into one of Kenya's wealthiest families. The Wanjirus weren't just rich, they were a name. Hotels, tea estates, construction companies, shopping malls. The kind of family people recognized before they even introduced themselves. Sophia had two older brothers. She was the only daughter. From the day she was born, she never really knew what it meant to be treated like an ordinary girl. At school, children wanted to be her friend because of her surname. At university, young men suddenly became interested the moment they discovered who her father was. Some wanted connections. Some wanted money. Some wanted a shortcut into the family's business empire. Very few wanted Sophia. As the years passed, she learned something painful. Money could buy comfort, but it could never prove love. So whenever she traveled, she never introduced herself using her family name. She dressed simply. She drove ordinary rental cars. She paid for her own shopping. She wanted, just once, to know what it felt like to be loved for who she truly was. One December, she traveled to Naivasha for a quiet holiday. No bodyguards, no assistants, no family name, just peace. One afternoon she walked into a supermarket to buy coffee. Only one packet remained on the shelf. As she reached for it, another hand reached for it too. Both of them stopped, looked at each other, then laughed. "You take it," the young man said. Sophia smiled. "How about we share it instead?" That was the beginning. His name was Brian. Brian wasn't rich. He worked as a graphic designer in Nairobi. He loved football. He loved roadside nyama choma. And he made the worst jokes Sophia had ever heard. Strangely, she laughed at every single one. For months, life felt wonderfully normal. They walked beside Lake Naivasha eating roasted maize, argued over which roadside cafe made the best tea, got lost while chasing sunsets. Sometimes happiness doesn't arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it simply sits beside you, holding your hand.
Months later, Brian looked into Sophia's eyes, smiled, and quietly said, "I think I found the woman I want to marry." Sophia smiled, but inside, her heart became heavy. She had promised herself something years before. If a relationship ever became serious, she would tell the truth. Not because she had to, because love deserved honesty. The following weekend, she invited Brian for dinner. She looked unusually nervous. Brian laughed. "What is it? You've been quiet all evening." Sophia took a deep breath. "I have something I think you should know. I owe you that much." Brian smiled. "You can tell me anything." She looked down, then slowly said, "My surname isn't the one you know. My family owns the Wanjiru Group." Brian laughed. "You're joking." She wasn't. She showed him family photographs, newspaper articles, business magazines, television interviews. The smile slowly disappeared from Brian's face. That night, he hugged her. "It doesn't matter. I love you. We'll figure everything out." Sophia believed him. But sometimes, the biggest lies are the ones we tell ourselves. Little by little, Brian began changing. Not overnight. Slowly, painfully, almost invisibly. He stopped holding her hand in public. His calls became shorter. His replies became colder. When they sat together, there was now a silence that had never existed before. One evening, Sophia finally asked, "Brian, did I do something wrong?" He forced a smile. "No, I'm just tired." But love teaches you something. It teaches you the difference between a tired voice and a disappearing heart. Sophia refused to give up. She invited him back to the lakeside restaurant where they had shared their very first date. She wanted to remind him of who they used to be. Brian arrived late, spent half the evening checking his phone. The old Brian would have laughed until the waiter asked them to leave. Now, he barely smiled.
As they walked to the car, Sophia gently reached for his hand. Brian quietly pulled it away. That tiny moment hurt more than any argument ever could. Still, she fought for them. She planned a surprise weekend. She recreated their first supermarket meeting. She even bought the exact same packet of coffee they had laughed about months earlier. Brian smiled politely, but only politely. His heart was somewhere else. Then Sophia noticed something else. Brian had become unusually close to her best friend Vanessa. Beautiful, confident, charming. But secretly, Vanessa had always envied Sophia's life. She never openly attacked. She whispered little things. "Do you really think her family will ever accept a man like you? You'll always be introduced as a poor husband." One day she realized she deserved someone from her own class. Brian laughed the first time, listened the second time, started believing it the third. Coffee meetings became regular. Phone calls became longer. Photos together started appearing online. Nothing obvious, just enough to make Sophia uncomfortable. One evening she gently told him, "Brian, I don't trust Vanessa. I'm not saying she's trying to steal you. I'm saying she doesn't want us to succeed." Brian sighed. "There you go again. You rich people always think everyone has bad intentions." Sophia looked at him in disbelief. Those weren't his words. They belonged to Vanessa. Still, she refused to let go. One night, she wrote him a handwritten letter. Not a text, not an email, a real letter. It said, "If your fear is my family, then let's build our own. If your fear is money, we'll start from zero together. If your fear is losing yourself, I'll spend every day proving that I chose you, not your bank account. Just don't push me away without giving us a chance." She folded it carefully, sprayed it with her favorite perfume, and quietly slipped it into Brian's backpack. He read it, folded it again, placed it back inside, and never mentioned it.
Days later, Sophia surprised Brian at work with lunch, his favorite pilaf, kochumbari, fresh passion juice. The security guard smiled warmly. "Your wife has come." Sophia laughed shyly. "We're not married yet." Brian walked outside. Instead of smiling, he looked embarrassed. "My colleagues are watching. You should have called first."
Sophia forced a smile. "I'm sorry." She quietly carried the untouched food back to her car, closed the door, and cried before starting the engine. At home, her older brother noticed her swollen eyes. "I'll talk to him." Sophia immediately shook her head. "No, if he stays because he's afraid of my family, then I haven't really won. I want him to choose me. Not our money, not our name, just me." Her brother said nothing. For the first time, he realized how lonely wealth could be. Sophia made one final attempt. Brian's birthday. She booked a quiet rooftop restaurant overlooking Nairobi at sunset. No luxury decorations, no expensive gifts, just fairy lights, his favorite songs, a homemade chocolate cake, and one empty chair, waiting for him. 7 o'clock came, then 8, then 9. The candle slowly melted. The cake remained untouched. Her phone vibrated. One message. "I'm with Vanessa. We need to talk. I don't think this relationship is working anymore." Sophia stared at the screen, looked across the city lights, closed her eyes, and whispered, "I've fought enough." She didn't call. She didn't argue. She didn't beg. Sometimes the strongest act of love is knowing when you've done everything humanly possible and choosing peace. Months passed. Sophia disappeared from social media. She traveled, healed, smiled again. She met someone. Not a billionaire. Not a celebrity. Just a kind man named David. A man who never once asked about her surname. Never compared himself to her family. Never felt threatened by her success. He simply loved her. 1 year later, Brian walked into a bookstore in Nairobi. Standing by the entrance was Sophia. She looked different. Peaceful. Radiant. Before he could speak, a tall gentleman walked over, wrapped one arm gently around her shoulders. "Ready to go, my love?" Sophia smiled, then turned to Brian. "Brian, this is my husband, David." David smiled warmly and shook Brian's hand. Then almost instinctively, he rested his hand on Sophia's tiny baby bump. Brian froze. She was nearly 2 months pregnant, planning the next chapter of her life with someone else. As they walked away, Brian stood there, alone. Not because he had lost a rich woman, not because she had married another man, but because he finally understood. Sophia had never needed someone who could match her family's wealth. She only needed someone who would never make her apologize for where she came from. That night, Brian opened an old drawer. Inside, he found the handwritten letter. It still carried the faint scent of Sophia's perfume. He read every word again. This time, through tears, he realized something that came far too late. Vanessa had never wanted him. She only wanted to win. Sophia had wanted forever, and forever had quietly walked away. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to the Invila Show, where every story reminds us that love isn't measured by money, status, or pride, but by the choices we make when love becomes difficult. Because sometimes the greatest heartbreak isn't losing the love of your life. It's realizing they spent every ounce of strength fighting for you, while you spent yours finding reasons to let them go.